Animation is really cool. Fighting games. Really cool. I am not one for subtlety. I am talking about animation in fighting games. Anyways, I think that fighting games have a pretty unique relationship with animation. It's not a single player game with only one camera, not everybody has their own perspective, we're all looking at the same thing and getting the same information. And that's what it is, information. Animation is the source of visual information we have to engage with the game. There are other factors at play, audio being a huge one, and admittedly visuals aren't as important if you have impaired eyesight, but you get what I'm saying. There's also a bunch of stuff like ease in and timing that animators use to basically force our brains into understanding the amount of force behind each attack. There's even a few books about this stuff and why it works. I don't know, maybe they knew what they were talking about. But I guess what I'm curious about is trying to figure out what makes good animation in fighting games, or at least what makes it effective. The reason I think this is interesting is because there are so many types of fighting games that play so differently. Like, there isn't one universal aspect of animation in every fighting game that you can just point at and say, yes, it has 3 units of cool as fuck, and therefore has accomplished what it attempted as a piece of art. Different games play differently, so the animation has to adapt to compensate. That's not to say that there aren't things that should be universal across the genre. For instance, I think the animation of a move should inform its purpose. Maybe that sounds basic, because it is. But what if it just didn't? Like, what if the animation behind a fireball didn't actually relate to the move's function? What if a Hadouken only had a hitbox right here, and this blue ball thing didn't do shit? That would be stupid. So yes, I think no matter what game, the animation should be used as a tool to communicate the function of each move. Why is this move so small and fast? Because it's a light. Same reason this one's big and slow, it's a heavy. Animated moves like this follows along pretty closely with the basic principles of animation. If there is more force behind an action, it should take more time for it to reach its max speed. Additionally, the greater amount of force behind any action, the more force that should be released on impact. It's a very clean-cut cause and effect relationship. But it should be mentioned this mainly applies to normals or buttons or whatever you want to call them. When you move on to special moves, the thing where you get all freaky on the stick for a minute then hit a button, things are a little different. When there's some way to modify the strength of a special move, like pressing a different button or holding down a button for a different amount of time, the animation should change to reflect the strength of the attack. Same logic we were just talking about. Stronger versions of a special move should feel heavier, do more damage, apply additional hit stops, something like that. Where it varies from how normals are animated is that there are usually different versions of a single special move. It's not always the case, but when it is, animators need to craft variations of one attack that players can clearly differentiate between. Whereas with normals, you only get one stand light punch, one 6p, so on and so forth. They can adjust the move's speed, the character's posing, the effects the move creates. This is done because different versions usually have different properties that need to be responded to in different ways. The heavy version of a special might be safe on block to compensate for having longer startup, but the light version could leave you at disadvantage in exchange for better speed. Creating differences in the animation lets players recognize that there are differences between the different strengths, and that in turn, there are different times to use each version. It's also worth mentioning there are other ways that developers can differentiate between special move strengths, like sound design. Or theoretically, you could make it so there isn't a difference between different strengths, depending on the intention of the move, but that's kind of off. That's not off topic? Not really. Okay, so certain moves might actually not have a difference between like their different strengths in terms of animation. But why? Isn't that bad game design? Well, I just proposed this question, so you can probably guess the answer is no. Or it doesn't have to be. There are a few reasons that a developer might share the animation between multiple different moves, and the most basic one is just to save time and resources. You know, like, look at the Shotos. Every Shoto is animated very similarly. You don't have to do nearly as much work to add another Shoto into a game, since they all use the same moves. It was especially easy when sprites were the standard, since you can just kind of alter some of the artwork and bam, slam, hot damn, brand new character. Well, brand new character. I mean, it's not even uncommon that characters would just use the same animation in multiple of their own attacks for the simple reason that games take a lot of time and money to make. If you can save a little bit of both here and there, why not? Sometimes this can cause problems though, like, it's not really that easy to tell the difference between Ken's crouch, light, and medium punches since they are the same animation, but like, Ken doesn't really want to use his crouch light punch anyway, so like, it doesn't really matter. And it's still technically following the concept we talked about earlier. Like, they look really similar, but one is faster while the other is slower and has more force behind it. So like it works. But there are other reasons you could choose to not alter an animation. You know, like from a design standpoint, not everything is meant to be reactable in the same way, or even reactable at all. Luke throws out a sandblast, and it travels so fast that you don't really have time to react to it with anything other than parry, so why change the animation? The only real difference between them is the distances they travel and the startup animations. They each do 600 damage, have 47 total frames. Third thing, the rule of threes is hard, but you get what I'm going at, right? This clearly isn't meant to be used the same way as a regular Street Fighter Fireball. Unlike a regular projectile, only the EX version even reaches full screen, so it's not going to be winning a lot of Fireball wars. But the limited range can actually be a tool if you're smart about how you use it. If you catch your opponent trying to tap parry from a distance, you can just throw out the light version and... Oh, I bet you feel stupid now. It creates a different relationship between you and your opponent and how they think and how they react to your actions. Instead of being a tool to control space, Luke's Fireball is this weird mind game tool. And you go to the animation and it makes you think, hey, this is pretty different from a regular Fireball. So I bet it has a different use. And you're right. Like that's so cool. And it's just there. Like it's just there. You can just figure it out. That is awesome to me. That's pretty basic general stuff. Like that applies to most fighting games. But like so many games play so differently. I mentioned it earlier. We have so many different subgenres in the fighting game genre that when you move from one to another, you have to change the way the animation works. Like, let's just look at Ryu. In the Street Fighter Alpha games, he's animated more or less how you would expect him to be. You have to wait for one normal to finish its animation before you start another, a type of combo called a link, where you have to learn the timing necessary to make things work. You can cancel lights into lights, and also like everything in a custom combo. I don't really know how custom combos work, but we're not talking about that, so we're just gonna ignore it for a minute. Okay. Street Fighter Alpha fans, don't hate me. But other than that, you need to react to whether or not your move hits your opponent, which is hit confirming, meaning you can't really just throw shit out and hope for the best. Well, you could, but you know. Even with the limited air blocking in the alpha games, going airborne is a very high commitment option with a very long animation to go along with it, encouraging you to stay on the ground if you want to have access to your best defensive options. Going about integrating animation and gameplay this way leads to a much slower paced style of game. You can react to a lot of your opponent's options from the mid-range, so you don't exactly have to be constantly guessing. Now move a few series over into Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and Ryu is literally using the exact same set of sprites and animations and everything, but it plays completely different from the alpha games. Part of this is because it is a versus game with tags and other shit specific to the subgenre, but even on like a single character level, things are very different. Although Ryu is using the exact same sprite sheet, the effects animation around it makes it pretty clear that the general power level of these games is a lot higher. In addition, MVC and a lot of other games like it let you cancel the animations of your normals into one another, usually in a series from light to medium to heavy. Technically, like literally every fighting game lets you cancel the animation of certain moves into specials, but here you can just go bop, 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 and you're just canceling the recovery of one move into the startup of another. With this, combos work super differently and are now not nearly as much about memorizing the timing of linking moves together, since instead you're just chaining them together in this loosely timed sequence. You can move so much faster, and a lot of your moves have so much more range and speed that you aren't just walking back and forth, you're schmooving and grooving on them everywhere. You have so much more utility out of a jump since there's universal air blocking and you can drift around after you've jumped a bit, and like even though Ryu can't, some characters can air dash, which it lets them alter their jump arc and momentum for both increased defensive and offensive utility. But put simply, there is a lot more stuff going on in this type of game, so its systems of animation and canceling need to allow for that insane shit. And I'll admit, there's a lot of stuff I left out in this comparison, since I was trying to look at how these games played on a purely character level, and that is really hard. It is hard to analyze how a game plays while just attempting to ignore like some of the most important system mechanics, but I did my best. So hey, good point to end this on, right? Is what happens when this goes poorly. You know, it doesn't even have to be to a crazy extent. If there's like a slight disconnect between a move's animation and its hitbox, you get some weird interactions. Like, it makes sense for some moves to have disjointed hitboxes that can't be challenged. Like, if you punch a sword, yeah, no shit, it's gonna hurt. Like, I don't think the sword is gonna be reeling back in pain as much as your fucking hand. But why does Jury's hitbox? go so far away from her hand. I mean, like, I'm a jury player, so it's nice to have access to this. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not going to pretend that it makes a whole lot of sense. I don't think this example, admittedly, is, like, a huge deal, but, like, it's still kind of confusing. There's a disconnect. Now, I don't necessarily think that everything about a move should be obvious from its animation. If that were the case, there would be a lot less depth to exploring this game, and that's no fun. I'm not sure what the balance between this whole, like, clearly conveyed information type shit and the stuff you gotta really dig to find should be, but that's definitely something worth exploring, right? I don't know, just not right now. Video's done. Subscribe. Bye.